I am going to kick the hornet's nest a little bit this morning. But before I do want to thank you for inviting me to OEB. I've never been able to make it to this event before. It's always coincided with the end-of-year series that I've written on hack education. But I put that series to rest for a while I focus on book writing. So I'm thrilled to be able to be here today, and I'm also thrilled that the book is almost done. I did speak a few years ago at the OEB Mid-Summit event in Iceland. And it was, I will confess, one of the strangest experiences that I've ever had on stage. A couple of men in the audience were obviously not pleased with my talk. They didn't like it that I admonished some of the speakers about using the phrase Uber for education. So they jeered. I can't say that I've experienced a lot of other keynote speakers at EdTech events get heckled, but if nothing else, it helped to underscore, for me, how the vast majority of speakers at these events give their talks with this kind of righteous fury about school as a factory model, often invoking Pink Floyd, which ironically is 40 years old now, but all sort of starry-eyed about a future of education that they say will be more automated, more algorithmic. And people in the audience sort of cheer that, hey, teachers, leave those kids alone, and somehow magically technology is going to make all of us happier. I shared this stage that day in Iceland. It was so weird, with a person who gave their talk on how in the future robots will love us and how they will take care of us in our old age, how they will teach our classes, how they will raise our children. And while my criticism of exploitative personalized learning was booed, the crowd went wild at this robot vision of the future. And as the speaker listed the marvels of new digital technologies and the future of artificial intelligence, they claimed in passing that we can, quote, already literally 3D print cats. And folks, let me assure you, we literally cannot, right? But no one questioned them, right? No one batted an eye. No one stopped and said, hey, wait, if you have made up this story about 3D printing felines, maybe you're exaggerating the capabilities of AI. Maybe you're exaggerating our desire for robot love, right? Why should we trust you when you tell us what the future is going to look like? Why should the audience trust any of us up here, right? Why do you? And then again, why might you mistrust some of us, right? I've been thinking a lot lately about this storytelling that we speakers do. It's part of what I call the EdTech Imaginary, right? It includes the stories that we invent to explain the necessity of technology, the promises of technology, the stories that we use to describe how we got here and where we're going. And despite all the talk about our being data-driven, about relying on learning sciences, on research, much of the EdTech Imaginary is quite fanciful, right? Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain kind of stuff. The storytelling is pretty powerful, rhetorically, emotionally. We get swept up in the 3D printing of cats. I know, it happens. It's influential internally, I think, within the field of education and education technology, and it's influential externally, right? Convincing the general public about the future of teaching and learning, what it might look like, making what it should look like, and making people feel as though what's happening in schools today isn't working, and isn't working in particular ways, of course. And this storytelling hopes to set the agenda, right? Hence the title of my talk, EdTech Agitprop, EdTech Agitation Propaganda. Oops. Now, what are you skipping? Now, arguably, this is the most powerful, well-known story about the future of teaching and learning, right? The Matrix, whoa, I know Kung Fu. I mean, you can talk about Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk all we want, but millions and millions and millions of more people have seen The Matrix, right? And this science fiction creeps into presentations that claim to offer science fact. It creeps into promises about instantaneous learning, facilitated by alleged breakthroughs in brain science. Take Nicholas Negroponte, for example, the co-founder of the MIT Media Lab, who in his 2014 TED Talk predicted that in 30 years' time, which is, I guess, 25 years from now, you'll swallow a pill and know English. You'll swallow a pill and know Shakespeare. What makes these stories appealing, right? Or even believable to some people? It's not science, it's special effects, right? The Matrix, after all, is a dystopia. Why would Matrix-style learning be desirable? Because of its speed? Because of its lack of teachers? Because of its lack of humanity? What is it in these stories, right? The Wachowski stories and Negroponte stories. What does it mean in these stories to know? To know Kung Fu or English or Shakespeare. It seems to me that knowing and knowledge in these stories are decontextualized. They're cheapened. It's a hollowed out epistemology. It's an epistemic poverty in which human experience and human culture are not valued. So I'm finishing up my book, as I talk about all the time, right, on teaching machines. And it's a history of devices built in the mid-20th century, before computers, that psychologists like B.F. Skinner built, believing that they could be used to train people, much like he trained pigeons, and it would, in the language of his time, individualize education. And I'm going to sidestep a discussion of the book for now. You'll have to put up with me again when I go out on book tour, right? But I do want to quickly note the other meaning of the phrase, right? The one that shows up for the Google alerts that I have in a sort of a vanity effort about the phrase teaching machine, right? It is the machines that are supposedly, ostensibly being taught. Supposedly, computer scientists are teaching machines, conditioning and training algorithms, as Skinner also believed, eliciting from them optimum learning behaviors. And from time to time, my teaching machines Google alert brings up other references to our fears that students that we're teaching are being reduced to robots, a suspicion about the increasing mechanization of students' lives, of all of our lives, really. The alert is never actually to the long history of instructional technology, although my book will change that. Because we act like history doesn't matter. We forget that we've been doing a lot of this stuff for a very long time, and it's that epistemic poverty once again. And this is, I think, my great concern with much technology, particularly education technology. It's not that artificial intelligence will, in fact, surpass what humans can think or do. It's not that they'll enhance what humans can know, but rather that humans, intellectually, emotionally, occupationally, will be reduced to machines. We can already see this when we talk on the phone to customer support. We see this in Amazon warehouses, and frankly, we see this in adaptive learning software. Humans being bent towards the machine. Again, why the rush to mechanize? Why the glee and excitement about this story? And I think in part it's because of this EdTech Imaginary, right? EdTech Agitprop. It's the stories that we tell. And when I say we, I do mean we, right? Those of us in this room, those of us behind the microphone at events like this, those of us whose livelihoods demand that we tell and repeat stories about the future of education. Agitprop is a portmanteau, of course, a combination of agitation and propaganda, the shortened name of the Soviet Department of Agitation and Propaganda, responsible for explaining communist ideology, convincing people to support the party. It took a number of forms: posters, press, radio, film, social networks, all in the service of spreading the message of the revolution, right? In the service of shaping public beliefs, in the service of directing the country towards a particular future. To suggest that storytelling in EdTech is Agitprop does not mean it's some communist plot, but I want to make it clear that there is an agenda, a political agenda, and a powerful one at that. There is ideology intertwined in our technologies, and it comes with this sense of urgency. We must adopt new technology, so we're told, or else we'll fall behind, or else we'll lose our jobs, or else our children won't be able to compete, right? We must adopt new technology, we're told, in order to bring about the revolution. So one of my goals in this talk is to defamiliarize, another trick of Agitprop theater, to defamiliarize some of these stories, right? To turn some of this EdTech Agitprop back on itself. It's my theater for you this morning. Politically, I want you to rethink some of your stories. Practically, if nothing else, I really you've got to rethink some of your slide decks. And I know that's mean, and you'll boo me again. But we have to think more critically about the stories that we're telling about the future. Stories that really are backed by powerful corporations and powerful political forces. We need to stop and realize what's propaganda, what's misinformation, what's disinformation, what's marketing, what's bullshit, and what's potentially dangerous and damaging storytelling, and really what is dystopian world building. Right? I want to run through really quickly a series of stories, snippets of stories really, and it's propaganda that I'm guessing you've heard, and you'll probably hear again, although please let me know if you hear it at this conference, because we'll have words. I'll come with you, we'll have words with the person who said it, right? Because I think that these stories are built on no more science than Neo's Kung Fu, and that Negroponte's Shakespeare pill, right? You know these stories, right? None of these is true. None of these is indisputably true. At best, we can shrug and say you can't really verify them. We don't know what the future holds. We can build predictive models, sure, for sure, but that's not what these are. That's not what these are. These are stories that get told to steer the future in a certain direction. Alan Kay once famously said, the best way to predict the future is to build it. And I responded, actually more accurately, the best way to predict the future is to issue a press release, right? The best way to predict the future is just make up statistics in your talk. Why not? These stories might work for some people. They can be dropped neatly into narratives, heighten the urgency to get institutions to adapt to a changing world. That's agitation propaganda. Many of these stories contain numbers. Somehow we read that as being based on data, but they're often cited without sources. So when you dig, there really aren't sources. There's often really no indication of where the data came from. I don't have a lot of time, and I'm just going to refute these stories very quickly. I'll post the links to the research on my blog. And certainly on your own time, you can verify them. You should verify them. Critical digital media literacy, right? It's not just for kids. Come on. Crying out loud, people. You know, we have to ask why these stories exist. And Benjamin Doxiador has actually provided a great example of this first one in an article he wrote, A Field Guide to Jobs That Don't Exist Yet, in which he investigates the source of this claim that 65% of children entering primary school today will end up in jobs that don't exist yet. And he traces it through appearances in the OECD, World Economic Forum materials. Its invocation in Kathy Davidson's 2011 book, Now We See It, in an Australian jobs report that now nobody can find. Traces it all the way back to a quip made by President Clinton in 1996. It's not a fact. It's a slogan, right? It's an invention. It's a lie. The half-life of skills is 5 years. This also has a convoluted and dubious origin. If you search for the claim, you'll find yourself sort of hopping from article to article in this sort of giant circle of citation that never really gives you the source. EAB cites, again, the World Economic Forum, which seems to specialize in churning out made-up statistics, right? But I mean, I guess that's what you do in Davos. The World Economic Forum cites a marketing blog. The marketing blog cites a John Seeley Brown book. The John Seeley Brown book, if you search its contents, contains no mention of the half-life of skills. It's fabricated. And if you stop to think about it, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. But it fits so neatly into these stories that we also tell about lifelong learning. Perpetually retraining ourselves, we're told now. We're always in danger of being replaced by a worker, being replaced by a machine. We have to keep retraining ourselves, we're told, because people no longer remain on the same job or in the same career. They're changing jobs more faster than they ever have before. They're doing new kinds of work, except they're not. They're not. Not in the US, at least. Job transitioning has actually slowed in the past 2 decades, even for millennials. The occupational structure of the economy changed a lot over the past 100 years, but not so much since the 1970s. Despite all the talk of the gig economy, 90% of people still work in a typical standard job situation. More people are not becoming freelancers. More people are not starting startups. Of course, we hear a lot about economic stagnation. People insist that in the coming years, robots are coming for your jobs. But robots are not coming for your jobs. Management may well be, right? Employers are the ones who make the decisions to replace human labor with machine labor. But even the talk of an impending AI revolution is speculative. It's agitation propaganda. AI revolution has been impending for about 65 years now. I mean, I'm sure this time it's for real, right? One more word. Robots coming from your jobs is one side of the coin. Immigrants coming for your jobs is the other side, and it's the same coin, right? It's a coin that's used to marshal fear and hatred, to make us feel insecure and threatened. It's a coin used as a sleight of hand to distract us from profit-driven practices. It's a coin used to divide us all so we cannot join together to solve pressing global problems for all of us. Is technology changing faster than it's ever changed before? I think it feels that way, but it's debatable. Historians don't think that it's true, right? Just because we're compelled to buy an iPhone every year doesn't mean that technology is changing faster than ever. It just means we're trapped in Apple's planned obsolescence, right? We should want a future of human dignity and thriving and justice and security and care for everyone. And education is a core part of that. But dignity, thriving, justice, and care are so rarely the focus of how we frame our stories of the future of learning or the future of work. Robots will never care for us, right? Techno-solutionism will never offer us justice. Lifelong learning is not thriving when it's based on economic precarity, based on instability, based on a disinvestment of the public good. When the future that we hear predicted on stages like this turns so casually, so blithely towards the dystopian, we have failed. We have failed. And it's a massive failure in our politics, to be sure, but it is a massive failure of imagination. We have to do better. Thank you.